car that feels like I would want to speed.
Yes, yeah. Hello and welcome to the second episode of the German Car Show. We'll start today's episode out by seeing what a friend of mine thought of an Audi A4. Now, this friend hasn't had much experience with German cars, just a 2001 Volkswagen Jetta, and very little experience with cars that handle a little bit more on the sporty side. So, even though an A4 isn't anything to write home about as far as horsepower and things like that, to someone with not much experience with German cars or sports cars, it might feel a little bit special. And so I thought, what will she think driving the car? All right. So have you driven a German car before?
I have, yes.
What did you drive before?
We used to have a Jetta. I think it was a 2006 Jetta? 2001, sorry, yeah.
Okay, 2001 Jetta. Okay.
Yeah.
So driving this one, this isn't a real big sports car or anything like that, but what are your first impressions of driving an Audi A4?
Well, from my perspective, having driven the Jetta, which is a really solid, heavy car, it was, reliable and firm feeling, but this one feels like it's just got some power and vim and vigor, and I really wanted to let it out as far as I could, but I just couldn't. Yeah.
Didn't feel comfortable enough to do
right,
that? Yeah, I
right,
understand. That's
right.
always hard when it's not yours, right?
Right, exactly.
Right, yeah.
Exactly.
But so I guess in general, you like the experience then?
I love the experience. I would totally do it again.
Okay.
Whenever you say.
Oh, okay. Maybe we can do a longer run next time then.
Yeah.
All right. So the only other question I'd have then, did this meet expectations, exceed, did it disappoint, and just based on what it looked like or what you were thinking in your head?
Well, you warned me that it, not to get too excited. It wasn't that great, but so I guess my expectations were kind of low, but it far exceeded them because it was way more fun to drive than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
It was definitely an experience that I would repeat given the opportunity, for sure.
Very good, very good. Yeah, I'm curious what the actual sport models are like, because to me, not having a lot of experience, that feels very sporty. So that might be where you're coming from too. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't generally drive sports cars, so
right.
This feels super sporty and very fun, and it's like, my childhood dreams of being a race car driver.
So if you were talking just someone who wanted a daily driver, it's a good enough sporty feeling for day-to-day kind of stuff.
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah.
I'd like to tell you guys a little bit about how I got into German cars in the first place. See, just a few years ago, I wasn't into cars at all. I just wanted something that would get me from A to B without much hassle, put as little money into it as possible. Generally, I thought the hobby was kind of silly, and never would have seen myself doing a show about cars just a few years later. But as a kid, I always had a fascination with gear work. I think the first thing I got interested in was water wheels and all of the working parts on the inside. Then I remember being very interested in watches and grandfather clocks, and by watches I mean the wind-up kind, not digital watches. Things, again, with gear work. So that was early in my childhood, and I kind of maintained that throughout my life, just an interest in things with gears. And in 2014, I believe it was, I started to get interested in watches again and realized that the Swiss and Germans were known for making some really good watches and sort of had a cultural heritage of making things with gears. They would do grandfather clocks and cuckoo clocks and things like that. They were known for their gear work. And then it dawned upon me that a car is really like a really advanced watch. Things like the automatic transmissions are just incredible feats of engineering that revolve around gear work. And then I thought, man, if the Germans and the Swiss are really good at making these mechanical watches, known for it worldwide, then are they known for their cars as well? And sure enough, the cars that we always hear about as the luxury brands and the performance brands are German-made. Mercedes-Benz, BMW. Now, funny enough, at the same time of around 2014 here, I started noticing a car on the highway for the first time. And understand, I didn't really think of cars that much. They didn't catch my eye. But this one did. I thought, wow, that's a great-looking car. And it was the Audi A4. And around this time, you started to see their classic daytime LED headlights. And those were brand new on the scene. 2014, you didn't see a lot of these cars on the road yet. But the Audis had those LED running headlights. And not only did they have them, but they looked like Hawkeyes. The front of the car had this real sleek, aggressive look to it. And before that, I don't know if you guys remember, but most cars, your average cars, looked like bugs. They had these big, rounded headlights and just rounded, bloated porpoise bodies. They were ugly, ugly designs. I really think some of the worst car designs came out in the 90s and early 2000s. But Audi really changed that. They gave the front of the car that sleek hawk-like look and paired it with those great LED daytime running headlights, and it created something that caught my eye for the first time. Now, I didn't know it was a German car. I didn't even know it was an Audi. I remember asking my girlfriend, "What's that car with the 4 rings on it?" And she was the one who figured it out and told me. And then, pairing that, Germans make good watches and they make these great cars kind of happened at the same time. It was an interesting combination. I started to do some digging and research on it. Now, here's my car history. My first car that I got in 2006 when I was a senior in high school, it was a gift from my aunt and uncle. It was a 1995 Nissan Sentra, just a tin can of a car, not peppy at all, pretty dull and boring. But, first car, exciting, right? And so that was my first car. It was given to me, wasn't something I chose. My second car, also very graciously given to me. It was a 1997 Buick Park Avenue, and for its day, man, that thing was pretty luxurious. It had like rain-sensing wipers and steering wheel controls, which back in '97, that was something you didn't see. And nice leather seats, very, very good sound system. But it was what you would call a land yacht. The thing felt like a boat driving down the road. It was not connected at all. Very, I don't know if you'd call it bouncy. That sensation of being on a cushion, whatever you call that. But anyway, that was my second car, also very graciously given to me by my parents, and I think I picked that one up in 2009. And then in 2012, my next car was a 1999 Oldsmobile Intrigue. Again, not a sporty car, and had a V6 engine like the Buicks, but it just didn't really harness that power, and it was an old car. So see, up to this point, all the cars I had owned were less than 10 years old, and none of them at all sporty or anything like that. Now, of course, I had developed this fascination with German cars, and one day I was kind of down and out with a surgery, and I started looking at used cars and realized that, hey, you can get into some pretty nifty, cool used cars for not too much money. I looked at Audis only on the Audi website, and I'm like, oh, well, I'll never be able to afford one of those. That's just my dream car. Maybe someday, if I'm really lucky, I can buy an Audi A3, But looking at them used, I realized, wow, these come down quite a bit in cost. Now, I do realize, like even then, I realized that these cars had a reputation for not being as reliable once they were used. I did some research and really did a nice cost comparison of cost of ownership for something like an Audi A4 versus a Honda Accord of the same year and similar specs as far as like having a sunroof and things like that. And I thought that the trade-off was fair. You pay a little bit more in maintenance for the A4, but it's a much neater car. And I really like that it comes standard with sunroof, heated seats, leather seats, premium sound system, at least compared to your standard type cars. it was a really good way to go for your money. So I decided I was gonna pick out and buy my very first what you could call a chosen car. My first choice as a car. Anyway, I did lots of searching on the internet, and I found a used A4 that was about 4.5 hours away from me, but at the price point I wanted, which at the time it was about $12,000. And so I drove down there. Now, this thing, I mean, for you guys into cars, this is nothing special. It was a front wheel drive CVT transmission 2010 Audi A4. To me, this thing was pretty impressive because I had never driven anything really or owned anything at least that was less than 10 years old, and never anything that had any kind of a sporty vibe to it at all. So when I first got in this car and drove off the lot to test drive it, I didn't put my foot down that hard from what I was used to, but it was hard enough. The thing squealed its tires and whipped out, and I felt really bad. The salesman was like, whoa, whoa, take it easy. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not used to this kind of feeling in a car. And so test drove it. The funny thing is during the test drive, and see, this shows my ignorance now, and even at the time, I just knew nothing about cars. So I'm hearing this shung, 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 shung sound every time I'm braking. And he goes, well, it's just, the car's got winter tires on it, so they're snow tires. They make a lot of extra road noise. So anyway, keep that in the back of your head. So I test drove the car, looked it over, had some cosmetic damage, some chips in places, things like that. But I thought, it's a 6-year-old car, and it's at a pretty low price point. This is probably about the best I'm going to do as far as the overall cosmetic appearance of the car. So I decided to go ahead and make the purchase, my first ever chosen car. And right from the beginning, things start to go bad. So I'm waiting what seems like a really long time, and the guy's like, oh, we're detailing the car up for you, making sure it's real nice, ready to go. Well, turns out the alternator had gone bad. Now, to their credit, they didn't let me drive off with it like that. They went and found a used one, and they were putting that in at that time. And so they got the alternator taken care of, and I ended up being out of there way later than I intended to be. On the way home, I noticed, the sound system sounds really tinny. I kept messing with the settings. I thought, I had heard it on the test drive. I didn't play it much, though. And I thought, this just doesn't seem right. Something's off with the setting. Turns out the car wasn't playing any sound out of the door speakers. So I was only getting the highs, none of the mids. I did get the bass from the back. The subwoofer was still intact. But man, no door speakers playing. It sounded just like tin garbage. So first disappointment. And, the braking and the shung, 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 shung sound, that turned out to be warped rotors, not the winter tires. So a few disappointments there. Anyway, after a few days of owning this car, I get a oil pressure light. Ooh, you don't want to see one of those, especially in an Audi, and especially from that year. Turned out that the engine had spun a rod, and I was out an engine. What? So I had to, replace the engine in this car that I had just purchased. And just to give you an idea, the car had 83,000 miles on it when I purchased it, which again to me was like brand new. I had only ever driven cars that were in the hundreds of thousands, maybe even higher, than that. And so that was quite a shock for me. Now, luckily, I had been given a powertrain warranty from the small dealership that I bought the car from. And yes, it was a used car lot. It was not a Audi dealership or anything like that. So thankfully I had that. In spite of that, it was still pretty expensive, of course, to get the new engine put in. Those things only cover so much. So I'm driving it some more, and I noticed that at a certain speed, it makes a real funny noise. Kept insisting to the mechanic that if they just got it at the right spot, they'd notice it. Sure enough, the transmission of the car was also bad. So I dipped back into that warranty, and mind you, that thing was like just on the edge. I had just a few miles left. I think it was like 90 miles that I had left on that warranty to get the transmission. So got the new transmission put in. And, earlier on we had opened up the hood and we noticed, there seems like a little bit of frame damage on this car. Has it been in an accident? That looks like some spray paint, like it's been repainted. Has this been hit or something? No, the Carfax shows that it's quite clean. It's never had an accident. Clearly it had. Somehow it was covered up. And unfortunately, the entire hood of the car had been repainted. So what started happening is big flakes of paint started coming off of the hood of the car. So not only have I been out a engine, transmission, rotors, now I see that the car has been repainted and the paint job doesn't seem like it's that good of one. And some other weird stuff happening, like lights going out in random places, things like that. Now, I tried to fix the sound system. I got a new amplifier put in, all kinds of different things, spending lots of money trying to fix this thing. And I never did fix the sound system. I did get the rest of the car working pretty good. Once they dropped in a new, well, not a used engine and used transmission, got the rest of it working pretty good. In spite of all of this junk that went on with this thing, it was the first time I had driven anything German-made and anything at all sporty like that, and man, did I love it. That front-wheel drive CVT Audi A4 was out of this world from my perspective at that time. It was incredibly smooth, yet peppy and fast feeling, and stuck connected to the road without being uncomfortable, right? It just had this perfect balance there. And the steering was incredible on this thing. So I was in love with this car, but also hated the car. I nicknamed it, I think it was Das Lerner, something like that. In German, it meant my teacher or the teacher, because I learned a lot about cars from this thing, taking it to the shop so many times and figuring out all the stuff that was wrong with it. And so I had a love-hate relationship with it. Now, it had so much of what I wanted, and yet was such a headache. I'm like, I need to get into another A4 because I do like the A4s. Now, the 2010 models did not have the LED daytime running lights like the ones that I really like, the ones that looked like Hawkeyes or whatever you want to call it. So did some digging, and 2 years later, I found a 2014 A4, only 46,000 miles on it, one owner. I went only to an official dealership. This was a Volkswagen dealership, so not Audi, but not a independent one. And the experience, of course, was much different with this one. So right away, the car had nearly no cosmetic damage. Runs great. I've had it now for a year. And I've put, I think, about 27,000 miles on it because I drive quite a bit in a year. And that car's been phenomenal, not once in the shop. So it's got like 74,000 miles on it now. Whatever the math is there, I probably did it wrong. But anyway, that car's been great. The only thing that is a little bit different that I liked on the 2010 A4 is the steering. Being hydraulic steering, I thought that the 2010 A4 had a much better feel to it when it comes to steering. That the electronic steering that the Audis are using now, it just feels very numb and disconnected. But man, do I love the Quattro system. That really is what Audi is all about, of course, and getting to experience a real Audi that has Quattro and that great ZF 8-speed transmission instead of the CVT. Ooh, that's a lot better, a lot more fun experience. It's interesting because before I decided to get a second Audi A4, I thought, man, I probably should stay away from these Audis. This one was such a headache, such a bad experience. I want something more reliable. So I went and test drove a fair number of other vehicles. So I'll go through that. I first test drove a Mazda 6, which was similar year, I think like 2014 or so. And those were supposedly, kind of peppy, fun cars. And man, I did not think it was even close to the experience of that 2010 A4. And I drove a Honda Accord Coupe with the V6 engine. That was a pretty good car. Still didn't think it was nearly the feeling I got from the Audi, but that was a pretty good car. And I test drove a Buick Regal with the turbocharged engine. Again, pretty decent, like kind of peppy feeling that you get from the Audi's engine, but still nothing in comparison. Just felt a rung below for sure. And I even in looking at different cars, I thought maybe a BMW is a good way to go. And I did test drive a 2014 328 X-Drive BMW, and I was really surprised at the interior quality. I mean, it just did not stack up to my 2010 Audi. My 2010 Audi had a much nicer interior than the 2014 BMW. That was crazy to me. And from a handling standpoint, I didn't think it was anything special either. Now, I'm sure there's some great BMWs out there. I am not knocking them. They have a fantastic reputation from a driver's car standpoint. I've heard it said that after about the year 2000 or so, they started going downhill. So maybe that's the case as far as what they're like to drive. But I'm sure there's some nice ones out there. I'm not trying to knock them. But I did really enjoy the Audi experience over the BMW. So I did end up with this 2014 model and am happy as can be. So you can see my experience with German cars is pretty limited right now, but I am excited to learn more with your help, and hopefully I'll get to meet some people, drive some other cars, and expand my horizon on these things. Love the way they look, love the way mine drives and feels, and I'm sure the others have similar experiences as well, just reading reviews and listening to other people talk about them. So what was your first experience with a German car? Leave a comment below. Let me know what your experience was. Why do you love them? Why do you hate them? What's your opinion on them? And what was your first experience like? Did it blow you out of the water? Did it leave you unimpressed? Let me know in the comments below. I'd like to talk a little bit about a product that I recently used and enjoyed a lot. It's a synthetic clay that helps you remove a lot of the exterior grime on the paint of your car. I had noticed with my 2014 Audi A4 that there were these little spots on the car that looked like little rust spots, and I couldn't get them off with a standard washing rag or sponge type of thing. I could really rub at them, and eventually maybe they'd come off a little bit, but I couldn't get them off. And someone suggested the clay for me, and so I tried this synthetic clay, and man, it did the job really quick and easily. And I like the idea of the synthetic clay. It's a lot easier to take care of and use in the future again. Worked great. So this is the company that I used, and if you ever need something like this to get some grime off of the car, I couldn't recommend it more. If you like the German Car Show, please elevate your thumb to express your approval. You may ring the bell to receive a notification that the show has now been posted. Do not be late.